I'm all over the place, Jake. Can't lie to you. This weekend in sports, namely football, was all over the place. Alabama defeated by Vanderbilt. Tennessee taken out of the mix. They dropped down to the AP poll, which is all over the place. IU does move up. We'll talk about that later. But as for right now, we'll talk some UINDY football at the Division II level. Jake, you made the drive, or well, you rode the bus with the team 6-7 hours to William Jewell. What was the experience like, the call? What's it like being around the football team, and how did Saturday go?
Well, I mean, as always, the football team, it's a great experience, as any team, and we have the privilege to travel with most of them. So, and honestly, I would say the football team is probably one of my favorite teams to travel with. They have a good time. They know how to have a great time. On the bus this year, Among Us was the game. Haven't heard that in probably 3 years, but they played it for 7 hours straight on the way to Liberty, Missouri, which, interesting. But apparently it was what it took to get a win as they pulled it out 23-20 in overtime. A very exciting call. Jackson Strasburger, 109er with me. Great call. I enjoyed the game. Coach Keevers wasn't too happy with how his team played, but obviously you get the win. That's the important thing.
You win 23-20 on the road after that road trip, and you see a performance from Gavin, 155, 2 touchdowns, and in the run game here, John Lewis doing his usual mark on the game, 78 yards receiving, a touchdown there, and also 63 yards on the ground. But how about the freshman coming into the mix, Garrett Sherrill, with a very, very solid day for himself?
Yeah, I mean, he is an absolutely explosive player, a game high of 82 rushing yards, as you see right there. Didn't get into the end zone, but he made all his carries count. He looked like he really wanted to be out there. That's what me and Jackson were analyzing. I mean, he looked like he really wanted to play some football, and the quickness, I can't wait to see him get a full game of reps next year. But John Lewis, that receiving touchdown, the game-winning touchdown, an amazing block thrown by Alonzo Derrick, and wouldn't have been able to get in without Alonzo Derrick. But the good part about being on the offense bus, you get to hear a little bit about how things went, and I got the chance to talk to Gavin. Not too happy with his performance, but obviously good enough to get the job done. But the big thing, the running backs, they got it done. That's the highlight of this game. Obviously the defense doing as they always do, forcing 2 turnovers. But the big thing is I got to talk to Coach Keevers, and for him, the big thing was coming out in the third quarter, putting points up on the board. As of 5 games into the season, the Hounds have only put up 6 points in the third quarter, and all of those third quarters. And that was a big point of emphasis. Unfortunately, they were unable to get it done in that third quarter. No points put up. It was 14-7 heading into the second quarter. It was 14-7 heading into the fourth quarter. So unfortunately for them, they weren't able to do that, but I would say almost perfect overtime decisions made. Won the coin toss, deferred, got the stop, forced the field goal, knew they had to go down and get a touchdown. John Lewis gets it done for the Greyhounds. Big win, in my opinion.
Yep.
This is a very talented GLVC squad, underrated at that.
And this is coming after a week where the Greyhounds lost at home to Saginaw Valley State. And that was really a tough loss to palate for not only us as commentators and analysts of this team, but for the team themselves. And it's hard to take that shot to your chest, hard to take that shot really to the chin and go out there the next week on the road as far as they did in Kansas City and go into overtime. So mentally, it looks like this team's back into it. It was tough, gritty, but they pulled it out. A similar game to Saginaw Valley State, but they got it to overtime, and as you said, made great decisions in overtime to lead to a win that saw John Lewis walking it off the field. I'll ask you, you saw this team in person. Are they back to where they need to be?
I don't think they ever left. I think that was a very talented Saginaw team. Weather obviously played a little bit of a factor in that one. I think that you can write that one off almost. And moving on to next week, Quincy, probably the second best team in the GLVC in my opinion, and a very talented squad. UIndy going to have to bring their A game. Ranked 22 this week. It'll be interesting to see if they move up in the poll after this win. But a very important win at that. And I think, like you said, important to getting back on the right track, and you like to see them getting it done in overtime, but they were down in the fourth quarter. Didn't give up. Came down. Ian Burr hit a long field goal. I think it was 40-something yards or 32 yards to tie the game going into overtime, and then obviously they were able to get that win. But very, very talented squad.
Yep.
And a very good coaching staff. That's the one thing that I'd like to hit on. Everybody on this coaching staff, it's like a big family. That was the vibe I got when I was on the bus. Everyone felt like they were one, and all the coaches making jokes with the players, having a good time. It's a fun environment to be around. I really enjoyed the trip.
And while we talk about football, volleyball's been on a tear. It's been exactly a month. Today's October 7th. September 7th was the last time volleyball lost a match. So that's 13 straight, if I'm not mistaken, and they've only lost 7 sets in that time. This team is absolutely dominating. If you haven't been to Ruth Lilly, the fitness center, you need to get there the next time the Greyhounds play some volleyball. And while we're here, it's going to be Friday against McKendree, but you'd have to go on the road to Lebanon, Illinois to see that. You can watch it on the GLBC Sports Network, though. We'll be back with some Division I football on Last Call.
So the overall mission here at Flanner House, Indy, is to help with the development and growth, the self-efficiency and self-sufficiency of the near northwest side of Indianapolis. When the Double Eights closed in the area, that left the near northwest side a food desert. So Brandon Cosby, the executive director of Flanner House, started with the Flanner House Farms, where they grow fresh produce organically for the neighborhood around. And then later on down the line, Cleo's came about. So we're here to help with the sustainability of getting fresh food at cheap prices to the locals around. Black owned, black ran. That's the gist of Cleo's for the most part.
If IU keeps playing the way that they are, we're going to have to go back to week 1 of Last Call, where I sat here and said that IU football was going to just do another season of IU football. We might roll the clip next week for you, but essentially I said that they weren't going to be any good. Well, here we sit at 6-0 after knocking off another Big Ten opponent in Northwestern, 41-24. Curtis Rourke, 3 touchdowns, 380 yards. IU is dominating right now, first in the Big Ten. Jake, this team, it's legit. You have to say it at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, in my opinion, a test for them, playing a Northwestern team, kind of that underrated team in the Big Ten. They've given Ohio State trouble in the past. They've given Wisconsin trouble when they were ranked. So this is a very talented Northwestern team, but obviously IU just better offensively. And you mentioned those 3 touchdowns, 3 phenomenal touchdowns. If you look at those passes, if you go watch the highlight reel, which we have right here, you'll see some of these passes, that one a handoff. But just an amazing job by Curtis Rourke, and you'll hear me talk a lot about him more in our next segment, as I am, we'll say, a little bit of a fan of Curtis Rourke, but
definitely
a little bit of a fan. But I've been very impressed, and Curt Cignetti, honestly, I think he might be a Coach of the Year candidate at this point. He's taken a team that was a 4-win team last year, 3-win team, something like that, and now they are 6-0 behind Curtis Rourke. You see that pass right there, diving in for the touchdown. But all around, I felt like all around IU played a complete game, and that's what it takes to beat Big Ten opponents like that.
I think no doubt a top 10 offensive threat in the country. And still, to be the devil's advocate of this team, you're going to face Nebraska after a bye week this week, and your schedule is going to see Michigan and Ohio State later on. IU, I feel like they can get in firefights with these guys. If you want to go up and put up 41 a game, that's probably what it's going to take if you want to take something out of the Big Ten. But could this defense stand up against an Ohio State, a Michigan, even a Nebraska? I don't know. We'll see. I'm excited because I know that Rourke, alongside his wide receiver core and Ellison in the backfield, that they can get it done. It's just going to fall on to the defense of whether or not this team can succeed postseason. And now this team's bowl eligible, so we'll see.
Yeah, actually the first team to become bowl eligible this year. And I think this running back room is a little bit underrated. You see Ellison and then Tyson Lawton. That's a dynamic duo right there. Tyson got into the end zone, but this is a very talented team. You mentioned that game against Michigan. College Game Day alluded to potentially being there on November 9th, and unfortunately for UIndy fans, I'm going to be there. If College Game Day is at IU, I will be in Bloomington, so I will not be on the call. But I'm very excited for that. If it comes to IU, that's the first time it has been in the state of Indiana in 2 years. Last time they came here was when Notre Dame took on Ohio State 2 years ago. So very big for the state of Indiana, and I can imagine this will probably be one of the biggest college game days. But after watching Michigan this week, I am pretty confident in IU beating them. Alex Orji went down with the injury. Not the best game defensively for Michigan. Usually that's their strong suit. So I would look for this team to potentially beat them. And right now they're ranked number 1 in the Big Ten somehow, as they are 3-0. But I see the ball keep rolling here. I think that they are going to have a chance at making the playoff. I know it's crazy to say, especially in such a talented conference, but I think behind Curtis Rourke, there's a chance.
That works against them, but if they do pick up that win against Michigan, I think that'll be huge. If Michigan still sits in the top 15 in terms of the AP poll, then that would do marvels for IU. They bring that one out and just make it a game with Ohio State. Right, I think you could definitely see Indiana getting one of those at-large bids, and I would love to see that. If not, they're definitely going to be in a high-profile bowl game where you're going to see anywhere from 35 to 55 points put up by Rourke and this offense. I'm excited as the ceiling. I'm not putting them as a contender yet. I don't think that's in the conversation, but a team to make the playoff 100%.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, but we talked a little bit about Curtis Rourke already. We'll move into our Heisman picks real quick. And a little bit of a spoiler alert, but I have him as my number 4. And you might look at that and be surprised, but this is a guy that is leading his team to a 6-0 start. The first in almost, 60, 70 years. And not only is he getting it done through the air, he's honestly becoming a little bit of a dual threat quarterback. He's able to get out of the pocket a little bit more. We saw it this week against a more talented Northwestern squad. But how about Ashton Jeanty? 95 carries, 1,031 yards, 16 touchdowns. Guess who the last person to do that was and when it was? I know I already told you, but
I'll let you tell us.
It was Barry Sanders in 1988 was the last time someone put up these numbers through 5 games. He had 130 carries, 1,000 yards, and 17 touchdowns. So very similar, and that was his Heisman season. So obviously, Jeanty on track, and he's doing it against competition. We saw him do it against Oregon. And the 2 games that he's been under 200 yards, he hasn't played the entire second half. So a very impressive start to the season for Jeanty. I'm excited to see where he takes Boise State. You talked about that at-large bid. I could see them getting that G5 spot. But
100%.
Looking at my number 2 and number 3, I feel like it's pretty obvious. Cam Ward is leading this Miami team, currently sitting at 2,200 yards, 20 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions on this season. A little bit high. I say only. A little bit high on the higher end, 1 per game. But led his team to a 20-point comeback against Cal this weekend, and it was all in the fourth quarter. They're down by 20 heading in, and they won by 1 point. And obviously Travis Hunter, you can't leave him out. He's playing on both sides of the ball, massive impact, and he plays almost every single snap. And it is hard to not have him in the conversation, especially with the stats, the plays he's making. That guy's special.
See, I'm with you for a lot of these. Rourke, I think, is in the discussion. I think IU needs one big win to cement that. And as we start to look at mine, we're not far off. You need Travis Hunter at 4 just for what he does on the football field. It's crazy, right? But as we look at Colorado's schedule, you have 2 ranked teams on your schedule, and that's Kansas State and Utah. Good news for Colorado, both are at home, if I'm not mistaken. So I think to be a Heisman, you need at least one big win over a ranked team, right? I don't think that's crazy to say, but you got to factor in position, obviously, it's a Heisman, which whether you like it or not, it's always going to be a quarterback-dominated award. Travis Hunter's in the mix at 4. If he stays on his course and Colorado stays on its course, they're 4-1 right now, which I wouldn't necessarily have predicted. But if they keep that momentum, then he could definitely climb this ladder. Then I'm looking at 3, Dillon Gabriel out of Oregon, a perfect record thus far. And I think for them to move as high up as they have on the AP poll, a lot of that comes to this guy, and he's consistent. I don't know if he's as flashy as Cam Ward, who we'll talk about in a minute, but he does his job. He's efficient, 11 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions on the season thus far, and I think he sits right here as for right now. We'll see as he gets deeper into the Big Ten schedule how that turns out, but as for right now, he has a cemented spot in this top 4. And now we move to these 2, which is where we see the big argument. Jeanty at 2nd, and it's only because he's a running back at Boise State. And that's the argument, right, around the Heisman and who it should be given to, why it's given out. This guy, historic, absolutely historic. And his impact on the field and even on the college game right now, it's unprecedented. But I don't think that you can knock off Miami until this guy has a big loss. He just had one of the best comebacks we've seen all season to this point.
Yeah, no, very impressive. And I know the announcers love to compare everybody to Patrick Mahomes. I won't do that, but definitely Lamar-esque. You see him, we saw Lamar get out of almost impossible situations yesterday against the Bengals, and I saw him do exactly the same thing against Cal, and very impressive, fun to watch, an electric player at that, and I think that's what would put him above anybody else in that Heisman, is that fun to watch factor. Everyone enjoys watching him play, but stats-wise, I think Jeanty does have a little bit of an advantage over Ward. Those 5 interceptions, look, it's a bright spot, or a brown spot on the banana, so to speak.
I like that terminology. As we talk about these 2, if Jeanty continues to have the season, stays at the rate he's at right now, he'll be the Heisman. However, I think if we look at Ward and he keeps his consistency, well, I'm going to say for 2 guys, right? They're both going to be the Heisman. But you're not going to have those. You're not going to have a co-award, and I think being quarterback does give him the upper hand. However, if he does have another game where he needs to come back, I think that puts Jeanty over the hump. You understand what I'm saying with that? You want, like, one of the best teams in college football falling behind so far to Cal where he has to come back. It's not a great look. If it happens again, he's down the list.
See, in my opinion, it comes down to whether or not Miami wins the ACC championship. It's almost a lock that Boise's going to win their conference championship. If they're able to win the ACC, I think that it's undisputable. Cam Ward is the Heisman, as he has led a team that was not even in the conversation of ACC championship last year, and now coming in potentially being the #1 team in the nation. With all these tough schedules, Ohio State has a couple hard games. Obviously, Alabama, Georgia already played each other. I believe this week it's Oregon and #2 Ohio State and #6 Oregon. So a lot of these teams are going to be knocking each other out, and that leaves the door wide open for Miami to sneak in there and grab one of those top 4 spots.
And you kind of alluded to the other problem with Jeanty is just that being in the conference that he's in, you don't play anybody. You've played one ranked opponent all year, and that was Oregon. Oregon did win, but Jeanty had 3 touchdowns, over 250 yards. He went ballistic. So the guy's proven that he could do it against the best. It's just the fact that the nation won't be able to see it on the scale that it really should, in all honesty.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And after this weekend, I got a chance to actually watch Oregon for a little bit while I was just laid up in the hotel. And offensively, I wasn't too impressed with Dillon Gabriel. Some pretty bad throws just from the little bit that I got to watch. But I was very impressed by the defense, which is a testament to Jeanty, as he was able to rush for 3 touchdowns against a team that shut out a pretty good Michigan State team. I wouldn't say that they're great, but they're all right, and running is one of their strong suits. If they're able to shut them out, I think that that's a testament to Jeanty.
All right. We're going to follow that race as it develops over the season, but we'll move up to the NFL after this short break on Last Call.
Emma Donnan, elementary and middle school. Discover the dawning difference. A school where you can celebrate others. Come together as a community. Be a part of a learning environment where students and teachers are appreciated. In Madonna, a culture that can't be beat, that's going onward together. A school filled with love. In Madonna.
I love my school.
As a Colts fan, it's inescapable. A trip to Jacksonville is almost an always guaranteed loss for the Colts somehow. Obviously, you're riddled with injury, Quiddy Pay, DeForest Buckner still out, Jonathan Taylor, the big one, Kenny Moore, a lot of big names out. But this is a Jacksonville team that was, well, I was going to say undefeated, but they had not won.
Winless, yes.
They were absolutely winless. One of the worst teams in the league. Indianapolis goes to Jacksonville. They lose 37-34. A disappointing loss. Jake, what's your breakdown?
I mean, in my opinion, this is all on the defense. Joe Flacco went out and did Joe Flacco. 33 for 44, 359 through the air, 3 touchdowns. He did his job, to say the least. Alec Pierce finally decided he wanted to show up in the fourth quarter. 2 big catches, one of them being a 56 or 65-yard touchdown, actually. But like right there, you just see him get I feel like every time I looked up when I was watching this game, someone was getting burnt over top, and it was always a Colts cornerback. So I think that you blame this on the defense. And you see we have this panic button right here. And me personally, I'm not hitting the panic button. They've lost 10 straight in Jacksonville. Some would call it a curse. Some would say it's good luck for the I mean, I don't know how you can look at that. And this is a very talented Colts squad. This is a very untalented Jaguars team. I mean, they scored 24 points in the fourth quarter, the Colts. 24 points in the fourth quarter and still managed to lose.
And I'll tell you this is the first time Jacksonville scored over 20. They scored 20 exactly against the Texans last week. Now they scored 37, the most by a mile they've scored all year. But I do think a lot of that is because of injuries. And the Colts just weren't the team that you're going to see out there next Sunday or last Sunday. And I think once you get everybody back, JT back, he's all your team. If you don't have JT, I mean, it's going to be an uphill battle for any game that you're in. But the Colts kept it close. Alec Pierce obviously had that late touchdown to tie the game up. Just too much time left on the clock for a defense that wasn't where it should be. So I'm with you. I'm not hitting the panic button just yet. But a question real quick. As we look at Joe Flacco's stats, 360 yards, 3 touchdowns. This guy's crazy. Do you rush Anthony Richardson back?
No. For the same reason that I don't think he should have started coming into the league. He's played 30 games. We've mentioned it every single time we talked about the Colts. He's played 30 games outside of high school. There's no experience there, and it shows in a lot of situations. In the game where he did get hurt, he came back in for a play. Obviously, we'll put the blame a little bit more on Shane Steichen for that one. But the slides, it's so late that the referee can't even throw a flag because he doesn't know how to slide correctly. And that's an experience thing. You learn eventually, hopefully he'll learn that he needs to slide. But the big thing for me is, why is Alec Pierce only being targeted 4-5 times a game?
Well, I feel like he only runs one route. You know, it's just the go route down the sideline, which is only going to be open a couple times a game. But I like where your head's at, honestly. I think experience is the best teacher, and obviously you want to work him into games. But the second best scenario is sitting behind a guy like Joe Flacco, who's been to a Super Bowl at that, who's played at the highest level with the highest caliber teammates, who's been on winning teams, knows what it means to win. I think that'd be great for AR. But at the same time, I think you still want it back by the end of the season, right?
Yeah, and I mean, this was, I believe, the 6th consecutive game Joe Flacco had with 2 passing touchdowns. So not only is that impressive, but it's miles ahead of anyone else. I think Joe Burrow is second with 2, and I mean that's a big difference. Joe Flacco knows how to get it done, and you put him on any team, he's going to get it done. And honestly, similar to the Red Rocket, my boy Andy Dalton. Everyone knows I love Andy Dalton. But bad week for the Panthers, bad week for the Colts, and unfortunately for me, bad week for the Bengals as well.
Well, we'll hop into our primetime pick'em as the record currently sits. I'm 4-4, and you're 2-6 on the year. Still some time to get better for both of us, really. Not exactly a highlighted resume for either one of us up here. But first, this game right here, this is a trap game made, plain and simple. Trap game. Kansas City is not as good as people think. Kansas City has not won by more than 1 score all year. And this is a Saints team that, is made for blow-ups, made for the big game against big teams, right? And I like Derek Carr. I like Alvin Kamara. I think they get it done.
I'm totally going to have to agree with you. The Chiefs are 5.5-point favorites, but they're missing all their starting receivers. I think Xavier Worthy is the only starting receiver that is still
a rookie
healthy.
At that.
Yeah, and rookie at that. And as you mentioned, only won by 1 score last week. Really struggled against the Chargers, in my opinion. And they have the over-under at 43 points. I think it's going to be almost a lock for the over, especially with the way that Saints offense has been playing. And I think we're looking at a shootout. This Chiefs defense not talented, or not that talented, not as talented as we've seen in previous years. And I think Derek Carr has a big game. And as you mentioned, a trap game. A lot of people are going to be betting on the Chiefs, and we know what happens when people bet on the Chiefs.
Mark it down right now. Saints going to take it, courtesy of Caden and Jake on last calls. We'll move to the next game. Jake, I'll let you start this one off. 49ers are 2-3 against the Seahawks 3-2. What do you think?
The Seahawks looked very sloppy this weekend against the Giants. I got the chance. I was playing some basketball. I got to kind of see in and out a couple plays here and there, and they would get to a third down, and then a penalty. And those are the type of plays that you can't have happen. Obviously, they were able to come out of there with a dub, but in my opinion, this is a 49ers squad, obviously injury-ridden. I don't think they have their top 2 running backs. Deebo Samuel is back in the lineup now, but I'm going to have to go with the 49ers.
Well, I feel it in my gut. Seahawks are going to win it. Don't ask me why. I probably couldn't tell you why. I don't think there's anyone else in the country thinking the Seahawks are going to win. But sometimes you just got to go with your gut, all right? People used to write off Geno Smith. He told us not to do that. He's not going to write back. Geno Smith is going to take one against the 49ers as we move to Colts and the Titans. An AFC South matchup. May or may not see AR back. May or may not see Jonathan Taylor and a couple other guys back with the Colts. But I think in any matter, they could put out the practice squad. I think they beat the Titans.
Yeah, I totally agree. Tony Pollard finally had a good game against Miami last week, and I was pretty impressed with that. But this is a good Colts team this year, and obviously the record is not that indicative of that. But we have this up here. We were slamming that week 2 or week 3, whatever that was.
And it's ready for week 5 if need be.
It is there. It is there, but I don't think we're going to need it. I think it's going to also come down to who's healthy, who's going to be able to play, who is going to be on the field personnel-wise for the Colts. I think defensively that's going to determine whether this is a high-scoring game or a typical low-scoring game for the Colts.
And that's the primetime pick'em. But we got to look back to last week when primetime Kirko had 500 yards. 500 yards against Baker Mayfield. That Thursday night matchup absolutely fed families. And between Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins, how could it be any better?
Yeah, you see all the memes of Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins on a random Thursday out here looking like Aaron Rodgers versus Tom Brady, and very, very impressed by Kirk. 30 fantasy points.
He's a dog.
He's a dog. There's no other way to say it.
He's a dog. More dogs next week. Dog. Last call.